Okay, Nate, today you wanted to talk about immortality.
Yeah. Well, immortality is interesting. You ask a lot of people, would you live forever if you could? Some people say they would. Some people say they wouldn't. Some people say they think that Neil deGrasse Tyson said on a video I watched the other day that knowing that he will die gives him the urgency to do things that are productive in the world, and if he could live forever, why ever get out of bed? Now, that's his thinking, and that's a bit subjective. I don't agree with that. If I could live for hundreds of thousands of years at least, or millions of years, I absolutely would. And what I would do in this futuristic world that I imagine, this would be through genetic engineering, of course. But what I would do is, I would hopefully I'd be able to have the means to build a livable spaceship that can support my life in space, and get me from one star system to another. And if I had a million years in this universe, I would just travel around the galaxy exploring different worlds. And this is what I imagine the aliens are like, because the aliens that I imagine are like the engineers from Prometheus. They're genetic engineers, and they genetic engineer themselves to live for hundreds of thousands of years. And because they can live for hundreds of thousands of years, they're actually able to traverse the vast distances of space and travel around the galaxy and the universe, seeing different worlds and exploring and setting up bases and outposts on different worlds. Certainly, expanding the human lifespan for thousands of years would definitely be one of the best ways to get us out, going around the galaxy and exploring other planets. Now, with the laws around this idea of extending lifespan for hundreds and thousands of years, I think lawyers and lawmakers have mused on the subject before. I've done some reading about it, but it's still a few hundred years away, so it hasn't really been well covered by, it has been covered to some extent in theory by academics and lawmakers. But I would say certainly if anyone wants to come along and say, we can't let people live for thousands of years because it's bad for the population growth, and sustainability of the planet, and wants to put a cap on life, this is in the assumption that we've developed this technology that can extend life for thousands of years. If that happens and someone comes along and says, we should put a cap on lifespans of, 500 years, I certainly disagree with that. Coming from an atheist perspective, I think the health system's attitude is an atheist perspective, and they come from the perspective that we should improve quality of life as much as possible and prolong life as much as possible, because life is finite and a blessing, and that's the compassionate thing to do, is to prolong life. I think that's why we don't euthanize people, but that's an entirely different discussion. I support euthanasia, by the way. So I think we have a right to extend our lives as long as conceivably possible, because I cherish and value every finite life in the universe, and I believe that every person should have the longest, most rewarding and satisfying life that they can. So if we can extend life for tens of thousands of years, then I argue that once that technology is developed, it is everyone's right to access it. And if you want to talk about sustainability and the population, I don't care, because people should be able to live long, rewarding lives while they're in the universe. And so I believe in extending human life as long as possible, with medical technology. Now, I know a couple of things about, I'm not going to pretend I'm a biologist. I don't know anything about how we would genetic engineer people to live for thousands of years. The couple of brief things I do know about it is I watched some videos a few years ago that explained this to me. You see, cells in our body, every time they duplicate, they're diminished slightly. So you'll have the original cell, then you'll have a replication of it, and that will be slightly diminished and damaged, and that's aging. As you go through your life, your cells diminish and damage. That's part of your aging process. So if you can genetic engineer cells so that they replicate perfectly and they don't diminish in each generation of cell, then they should keep replicating as young cells, and you should remain young for many years. So we need to learn how to make cells replicate the same every time so that they remain youthful and don't gradually degrade. Now, I might be totally wrong about that. That's something I read many years ago, but you can go look it up and comment on the video if I'm wrong and let me know. But that's what I was reading about immortality. And also, I want to point out there are some creatures which are purportedly immortal on the planet. I've done this reading as well. There's an undersea creature, I think it's like a squid or something, or an octopus. It's some sort of octopus or jellyfish. Sorry, it's a jellyfish. It's some sort of jellyfish. Anyway, it doesn't age, and I have to go and look this up again. I read this a few years ago, but there's about, maybe 5 or 6 of these creatures that have vastly different aging processes to us, like this jellyfish that can purportedly live, I think, for thousands of years because it continues to regenerate. There's also another sea creature which grows old and then reverses its aging and goes back to being like a baby and then starts its life over again and just repeats that cycle over and over and over again. It continues to get old, then get young, then get old, then get young. But the thing is, all these creatures can be killed and can be eaten. So we're really talking not about immortality. To be immortal, you'd have to be impervious to a bullet. You'd have to be impervious to everything. But we're talking about ending the aging process. So the point of go and look into these animals that can live for thousands of years, these jellyfish and these sea creatures. There's a few of these creatures. You can find a list of them on the internet and read about how their different aging systems work. Go and learn about them so that you can realise that it's not this ridiculous idea that genes could work in a way in an animal that the animal wouldn't age. It is possible, in theory, that genes could work in a way in an animal that the animal doesn't age. It can still die, it can still be killed, but it doesn't age. So through gene editing and gene manipulation, it is, in theory, we think, from what I've read, possible to end the aging process. So it's not this impossible thing, and not so necessarily in 1,000 years, people may be genetically engineered to live for tens of thousands of years. And that technology and that genetic engineering is all happening now, and it will be for the next generation or the generation after that. Sometimes I'm a bit disappointed. I feel like I've just missed the boat. Had I lived for a couple of hundred more years or been born a couple of hundred years later, I might have been able to live for tens of thousands of years, build or buy my spaceship, my rocket ship, and travel around the galaxy exploring other worlds. But I think I've missed that boat, so I'm probably going to die before I'm 100. But yeah, I'm not afraid of playing God in that way where we could be living for tens of thousands of years. I think it's a good thing. I think it makes life better. And that's coming from an atheist perspective where I think death's a bit sad. Some people embrace death. I think death's a bit sad. I'd like to be around longer, and I'd like to do more things in the universe, and I'd like to learn more knowledge, and I'd like to see more things, and I'd like to explore the universe. So I think it's a bit sad that we don't get tens of thousands of years, or we don't get hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years. I'd like that. I could be around for 1,000,000 years and I would never run out of things to do. And I would never get bored. I would just create, and I would just explore the universe and write and read and study. Give me 1,000,000 years, I'd never run out of things to do. So people have different thinkings on that and on the idea of living forever. That's my thinking on it. Comment in the video what your thinking is on immortality and ending aging and living for hundreds of thousands of years. Thanks, guys.